Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 100 of the Founder Files. Before getting into the topic and the guest today, I think I just want to reflect on the fact that we are actually at episode 100. I never actually dreamed or thought that we would get here. I was just a guy starting a podcast in order to do market research and meet cool people in entrepreneurship, and now we've done 100 of these. So yeah, this is a great place to be. I'm very grateful that I get to share this with you. So thank you for tuning into this really momentous podcast for me as a human being and for the Founder Files and for what we've done so far. So this is great. And yeah, I guess to get into the 100th episode. Today, I am talking to the CEO and co-founder of Future Forex, Harry Scherzer. Now, if you have not heard of Future Forex is a, surprise, surprise, Forex company that is absolutely making waves in the South African market over the past 4 years. And in 4 years, they've grown from 0 to almost 100 people, and now they're doing 2 billion rand in transactions a month. So they are absolutely soaring at the moment. And obviously the first question is how? How have you managed to grow something so quickly out of the gates? And kind of the answer, surprisingly, is that, well, we actually had to just educate our market on why our product is just not too good to be true. And we found out about that and how he's been able to do that. The focus on customer service and experience and how that made him stand out in the market and just give people an incredible experience and how they are tackling the oligopolies of the banking industry at the same time. We then get into personal philosophy, actually. We talk about his views on leadership. We talk about why having difficult conversations is really hard, but how he manages that skill set and how he navigates, the not so nice parts of leadership. We talk about his experience of gratitude and combining that with ambition and how these potentially opposing forces he navigates as a human being to be someone that is happy and content as an entrepreneur, but still constantly striving for more, especially when his identity is so tied to the business. And I feel like what I just said in a sentence, every entrepreneur will relate to. So that was a fascinating part of the conversation. So I guess this is one of those episodes where, besides getting into some of the details strategically of how a business is really come out the gate so strong in 4 years and build such a success. And also, I forgot to mention, totally bootstrapped. There's no investment, there's no VC behind this. They've totally done this themselves. How they managed to do that. But then also getting into the human being side of this and understanding Harry as a human, how he thinks. So I think this is a quintessential episode that explains why I love doing the podcast. And that's looking at entrepreneurship as through the lens of an entrepreneur, both in terms of the business, but in terms of the human being. And if you like that content as well, if you like to hear these authentic stories from entrepreneurs like Harry, then please make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. It is the best way to support the podcast, and it is the best way to make me feel happy. So thank you once again for tuning in for another episode. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Harry Scherzer. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Harry, very warm welcome to the Founder Files, and this is a very prestigious milestone for the podcast because this is episode 100 right now. So thank you for joining me on such a cool moment. Even literally before I clicked record, I was saying how grateful I am that we've hit the 100 mark. So happy to be sharing this with you, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, Cam. Firstly, congrats on getting to 100. Hopefully it's the first of many century milestones. But yeah, really stoked to be here.
So cool, man. The first question, as per always, is please explain Future Forex, just as a business and business model. How does it work?
Yeah, sure. We have two products within Future Forex. The first is a crypto arbitrage product, whereby it's an investment opportunity whereby we found a gap in the market where the price of cryptocurrency abroad is slightly cheaper than in South Africa. So very simply put, we take clients' money, send it abroad, buy cryptocurrency there, immediately send it to South Africa and sell it in South Africa at a profit. And we can do that over and over again to make better than market returns at a lower risk. So that's been a really exciting one. And from there, we moved into international money transfers, where we basically take the banks head on and say we can do the sending of money internationally better, quicker, with better service, than the banks. And yeah, we're basically challenging the big boys as a disruptor.
Nice. I mean, from what I gathered about your business and just preparing for this podcast, you are the kind of founder and business that every single investor wishes they could invest in, but you're bootstrapped and you don't need the capital. So I guess talk to me about that and how you've been able to, I wouldn't say like, how have you held off the investors? So I'm assuming there's some people that are wanting to throw their checkbooks at you.
Yeah, firstly, thanks very much for that. I take it as a big compliment, as I'm sure would my co-founder. Look, we are a completely self-funded business, and I'm always thankful for that, because I speak to some of my friends and also founders who say that they spend sometimes more than 50% of their days chatting to their shareholders and just placating them and letting them know what the business model is, what the plan is, and not really adding value to the business, just sort of making guys that have thrown money at them happy. And number one, they don't enjoy it from the people I speak to, and number two, they don't add value to their own business. So I am extremely grateful. You talked about, we were talking off air about gratitude. I do have a sense of gratitude that I don't have to spend time talking to guys that know less than me about my business, why we're doing the right things. And I think it's one of the reasons for our very quick growth. In terms of sort of holding people off, etc., initially we would entertain these discussions, quite frankly. We'd entertain it. We'd get to a point where sort of figures were thrown around, and we'd always reject it because we were like, but we don't want this. And then we kind of realized we shouldn't entertain it in the first place. It's a huge waste of time. We're both sort of presenting things on either side. And we kind of know at the back of our minds that we're too sort of young and ambitious to take funding, because it's more exciting when it's your own. So maybe from a business point of view, from a lower risk point of view, it would make sense to sell off some of the business, keep the money in the bank, and say, right, I've got capital. But from a fun and excitement point of view and being all in point of view, it's not something either of us really want. So we've kind of stuck to the logic of right now we don't want to sell. This is too fun. It's too exciting in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a whole bunch of opinions just around selling and exiting as a founder to begin with. That could take up the whole podcast in itself. So maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. But I'm going to park that for now. But I mean, just talking about the scale that you're at, I mean, almost 100 people in 4 years. And I mean, for me, it's the number of people is usually the number of markets you're in, the number of products you have combined is for me the best equation to show how complex your business is. So from a complexity perspective, you've obviously scaled up to nearly 100 people, but that doesn't, it's usually some kind of vanity metric on one side, but doesn't give the picture of the scale that you're at. But it does give a sense of how quickly your business has really grown as a fintech company to be, almost 100 people. I mean, that's incredible in such a short space of time. The fact that you're even able to sit here on podcast episode 100 and not look like you've got these massive bags under your eyes trying to keep up with that kind of growth. I guess just give me a sense of the scale that you're at now, so we can just get a sense of how your business has got to where it is now.
Yeah, so this primarily, Cam, starts with strategy. From a strategy point of view, while a lot of our competitors and a lot of other fintechs go the pure tech route, they're like, we've got the tech, we'll let people use our tech, and people that aren't able to use our tech efficiently need to sit in sort of logging tickets and deal with our support desk or whatever else. We kind of think that fintechs have got that wrong. And the truth is that fintechs should be double-edged and have two prongs to them. The one is the tech. We actually won the top technology company of 2024 last week with
Congratulations.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Digital Innovation Award. So that was really cool. So we know our tech is extremely strong, but what we've done differently is we've paired that with having people, being very people-centric. So we have, for example, a relationship manager for every single client that we have. They have a dedicated relationship manager. And so because we went the route of we want to be people heavy because people trust people buy from people want to work with people. And particularly when you're in a crypto space, which is often sort of mistrusted and synonymous with scams, to prove that we sort of aren't a scam and are above board, etc., we wanted people dealing with people. And so that was why we took the market sort of more quickly than the other companies. But it also meant that to keep up with the demand, to satiate the demand, we had to hire a lot more quickly than even we'd expected. I definitely didn't start this company and think, in 4 years, 4.5 years, we're going to have 98 people. That definitely wasn't the intention. But you didn't want to let your level of service decrease. So it kind of was demand led. There was more and more demand, and we thought, if there's more and more demand, we need to hire more and more people to satiate the demand. And that's kind of how it came to this. And it's just been a rolling effect, a snowball effect of clients being delighted, telling their friends about it, telling their family about it, and us needing to hire more people. And that's kind of how we've got to where we are at the moment. It's been really exciting. And it's probably, in fact, Cam, it's my favorite part of the entire journey. I love helping people. I love supporting people. I love the idea that I'm enhancing people's careers and showing them a better job than they had previously, or employing them if they weren't employed. That is in fact my favorite thing of this entire journey.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, really chuffed for you in the journey that you've had so far. The fact that it's exceeded expectations, and I guess you still have your sanity intact, which is really cool.
Just about, yeah.
Look, you also touched on the really critical points of customer experience and customer service. I think it can be often something that's I wouldn't necessarily say overlooked, but like in the game of hyper growth and hyper profitability and return on capital employed and these getting those ratios as much as possible, the customer can often suffer. And it's just because of a service element, because you don't really have people to really provide the more qualitative side of the experience that customers have. And I think what's interesting, I spoke to Kian Pillay from Stitch, and the way he's winning in the market is the fact that it's like, if you pick up the phone at 1 o'clock in the morning, one of my engineers within 5 minutes will be at the computer and help you with your problem. How do you compete with that, right? So if you just provide a great customer service and able to solve the problems, because no one else is doing that. It's like business hours regularly. I think in your situation, the customer, I give that as an example. I obviously want to get deeper into customer service, but I do want to kind of put a pin in that topic, because the point that you raised there around demand and growing demand. Talk to me about that. How did you, the fact that there's so much demand in 4 years, what kind of epiphany, realization, like golden egg did you figure out and find that, no one else had spotted before?
Yeah, Cam, I mean, the arbitrage, the crypto arbitrage product that we offer is, in my view, the best investment in the market. And I say in my view, and all of our customers' view, I'd guess, because they're all invested and heavily invested. And so why it's so good is because you're basically making very strong returns. Our average annualized return is 45% per annum, far better than any unit trust or bank account or anything like that. But with extremely low risk. In over 130,000 trades, we've made 0 losses. We're 100% profitable on a per trade basis. And the reason for that is that this entire thing is fundamentally a price gap. It's a price inefficiency. So you have a situation where the price of, for example, Bitcoin in South Africa is 2 to 3% more expensive than it is in America. So fundamentally, all we're doing is we're buying and selling at the exact same time, buying where it's cheaper, selling where it's more expensive. And only if that price gap is wide enough to make a profit will we trade. Otherwise, we won't trade in the first place. And so the question then became, and what the reason we didn't get immediate huge amounts of demand was because people said this is too good to be true, and while I could tell them, look, I'm an actuary, I understand risk mitigation, it only got you so far. They actually didn't trust that this thing can be that good just because, he's got a decently quantitative background. It's not enough. So what we had to do is actually pivot from, look how good the returns are, to let's educate you on why this exists, how this exists, what's happening. And so we started moving our sort of marketing campaign, if you would call it that, or our brand strategy from, look how great the returns are, this is better than anything else you can earn, to let's educate you on why this exists and why you should take advantage of it. And in a very short nutshell, the answer to that question of why does this exist is because what we're really doing is we're utilizing people's foreign exchange allowances. Each South African gets up to 11 million rand to send offshore per annum. But no one uses 11 million rand, or very few. Unless you're mega wealthy, you're not going to use 11 million rand. And all that Future Forex is doing is we are monetizing any unused allowance. So even if you are wealthy and you want to send 2 million rand of it offshore, we'll use the remaining 9 million and get you exceptional returns. Not that you need to give us 9 million rand. We do it over and over again, cyclically. So you can give us 100,000, 200,000 rand. And we go over and over again until we utilize all 9 million or 11 million or whatever it is. So what we're really doing is we're monetizing an allowance that every South African has. And that's what makes the return so good. That's what makes the risk so low. But on the negative side, that's what limits it to between 100 and 150,000 Rand per annum that you can earn. So it's one of these that's not going to make you a millionaire, but it's a fantastic alpha in your portfolio. It's a fantastic way of increasing your average return because the return is so high on this one product.
So that immediately makes me think now, if it's that straightforward and simple, why can't people just do this themselves, right? What's your, like, sounds like the ultimate, like, if you know, like, slightly what you're doing, wow, why are people not doing this themselves, and why should they come to you? I feel like I'm drilling you on your sales pitch here and your market positioning, but like, I just want to understand, like, what is your advantage is, because like, there's obviously going to be other organizations that you'll be competing with, but I think the biggest competition here is just someone who's slightly savvy doing this themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, Cam. You said it's your 100th throw. I've answered this question over 100 times, so I'll give you the answer to what value do we add versus a savvy investor. What it comes down to is when the premium is 2 to 3%, if you as Cam wanted to go to the bank and say, hey, I want to send money abroad because I want to do arbitrage, the spread that they would charge you would likely be close to 2%. So you erode your entire margin just based on the spread. Because of our economies of scale, we get razor thin margins from the bank. And so that far more than offsets our cost, number one. Number two, we have hedging in place. In other words, at the same time as buying abroad, we sell in South Africa, exactly the same time. And the reason we're able to do that, again, is because we're a big established company with floats on either side. So we're able to do this where an individual isn't going to be able to set up floats and set up the ability. And number three, we have traders consistently looking at the market and picking the best time. So unless this is a full-time job of yours, you're not going to get the same opportunity. So there's three reasons that actually make it impossible for even a savvy investor to do it themselves. You'd have to sort of gain the economies of scale, get really strong pricing from the bank, which still wouldn't be as strong as our pricing given we do 2 billion plus Rand a month.
Sure.
And then on top of that, you'd have to get hedging so that if the Rand decreases or if Bitcoin goes the wrong way in a trade, you don't end up with a net loss. So for all of those reasons, even if you're super savvy, the best thing you can do is utilize us to do crypto arbitrage. The most savvy investors are ones that are our clients, as it turns out.
Okay, so then talk to me about, I guess, getting to that point in the first place, because I mean, you spotted this opportunity, you saw this gap in the markets. Right, talk to me about the founding story and how you got to your own business, the scale where this was a profitable model that no one could really replicate unless they just actually copied your business.
Yeah, so there's always luck in business, Cam, and in our case, what's lucky is that when we started, the premium was far wider. So back then, we didn't have hedging in place, we didn't have great rates from the bank, but because when I started initially back in 2017, the premium was 25%. It was 32,000 Rand. Yeah, 32,000 Rand in South Africa. 32,000 Rand abroad, 40,000 Rand in South Africa was the price for a Bitcoin. Bear in mind, it's now 1.7 million Rand. So I thought it was too expensive back then, but it just shows what I knew. But yeah, I started doing this for myself by buying it at 32, selling it at 40, making some fantastic returns. Obviously, that shrunk. And by the time we were doing this for clients, it was at, say, 5%, which meant that we were giving a lot of costs away to not doing it efficiently with the bank, to not hedging, meaning that once in a while, Bitcoin would go the wrong direction and it would erode some of the profits. We still would make profits, make large profits because of that 5%. Now that it's tightened to 2 to 3%, that's no longer feasible. It's just too low. The market conditions are just too low at the moment to even allow that. So we got in at the right time. We capitalized on that. We improved our product to make sure that even if spreads went down, we'd never make a loss on a trade by hedging. We spoke to the banks, got our TOC license, our Treasury Outsourcing Company license, which allows us to send on clients' behalf, and basically made sure our product was top of market.
Okay. I'm going to pivot this conversation completely because I had an idea, a thought that popped into my head. Markets, one thing that I find fascinating about them from a very philosophical view is that one thing that they're exceptionally good at is equilibrium and homeostasis. And so, especially if you just zoom out far enough. I'm imagining now, and this could be a completely ignorant question because I'm not an actuary, I'm a psychologist. So, but the amount of volume that you're pumping through this market in terms of this arbitrage, surely you're having an impact on what that premium is, what that price differences and those percentages are. So I mean, like, Is there a risk that over time, if you're doing 2 billion rand a month, as you're saying, you're actually just going to squeeze your own margins more and more, just as the markets balance themselves out? Is that how it works, and is that going to happen?
Yeah, Karen, not an ignorant question at all. A very pertinent and correct question. We definitely are impacting the market slightly and narrowing the gap slightly. However, relative to the amount of demand for crypto in South Africa, we're still a relatively small player. There's enough demand for crypto that we're not making a massive difference to the market, albeit a small one. And the reason that this arbitrage exists in the first place is because of exchange controls, because South Africans are limited in how they can get money out the country. And so they're willing to pay a premium for crypto to get out of rands effectively without utilizing their allowance. So the reason that this exists in the first place is a fundamental reason. And you're right. If we saw this in Britain and America, two different markets which don't have exchange controls, it would equalize immediately. The fact that it's still around since I first saw it in 2017, what's that, 7 years? In 7 years, the fact that it still exists tells me that it has to be a fundamental reason, and that there's nothing here in terms of just a unlucky market inefficiency. It's rather fundamentally there's a price gap here, and that's why it hasn't gone anywhere. Albeit that it's narrowed, it hasn't gone to zero, and we don't expect it to go to zero anytime soon.
That's super fascinating, because now, I mean, we also again spoke offline just about like the theory of growth strategies, and I guess the theoretical different one. Now, the most popular one when we talk about scaling is geographical expansion. In your space, I mean, geographical expansion is always complex, way more complex than I think people predict. Yours is completely different because it's very currency dependent. So hypothetically, what countries could you expand to? Have you looked at this? Is this something that you're thinking about scaling right now? Have you already done this? What's your view of being able to scale this internationally and into new markets?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Cam, one of the drawbacks of crypto arbitrage is that South Africa is the only place that it works whereby there's a price gap and the regulations are developed enough and sophisticated enough to be able to deal with it. So as an example, in Nigeria, I don't know what it is at the moment, but I remember looking when it was 20% price gap between Bitcoin in Nigeria and abroad. The problem is that getting money out of Nigeria is almost impossible. So you have a situation that from a regulatory point of view, you don't want to touch it. I don't want to end up in a prison in Lagos because I did something that I didn't know wasn't allowed. And so we've never looked to expand to any other countries that have price premiums or deficits because we don't understand the regulations well enough. And we know that in South Africa, it's fully allowed. We're fully licensed. The regulator's completely on board. I'm too scared to do it in other countries because of the regulation around it. And so we can't expand this product geographically, not to mention that the first world countries all have the same price. The UK, Australia, America, etc. You're not going to find a price inefficiency there. So you're either going to go to a very third world country, which is Wild West stuff, or you're not going to find a price gap. And we happen to play in between, where South Africa, because of exchange controls, has this price gap, but isn't Wild West. It actually has very strong regulations around this. We're a crypto asset service provider by the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. So they actually have fully regulated this. So we're very lucky that we're in the one country in the world where this strictly works. And so from the crypto arbitrage side, no, we can't do geographical expansion, which is not good for our diversification. It's not good for our risk, right? There's a big risk here. There's also a risk that the premium just squashes at some point out of our control, right? And that sort of talks to why we went into foreign exchange in the first place. Not only were we embarrassed by how badly the banks handle foreign exchange in terms of pricing, in terms of service, etc., but we also realized that as a business, when you've got 98 employees, you can't sort of say, all right, cheers, guys, this has been fun, if the premium squashes. You have to have a second product, which we're looking to grow and have grown to a point whereby if the arbitrage died, we would be able to keep everyone and grow rather than retract.
Perfect. That's a very great segue into that next product, but I'm not going to let us go down that route because I've got another question on the geographical expansion. So
Go for it.
Obviously, not being able to take the products to other markets. I mean, that's you've explained that quite clearly. What's stopping you from getting customers in other markets to come just participate here? Because I mean, that's the interesting thing is about the nature of what it is that we have is it's like the only place in the world where this arbitrage can exist. So surely there, and again, this is where the forex space is really complex, and like where people have full-on careers, they're full-on organizations just on forex, for example, yours, right? And so this is explain to me why it's not just as straightforward as someone from, let's say, Senegal coming in and bringing some cash into South Africa to participate in this arbitrage.
So it's exactly the same issue, Cam. Not only is South Africa the only place whereby this makes sense, but also the only way you can do it is using your 11 million Rand, your 1 million Rand SDA, and your 10 million Rand AIT. And that is only granted to individuals that have a South African tax number and are effectively South African citizens. And so if you don't have that with SARS, you can't partake in this. So it's a very niche product. It works for South Africans, and it only works in generating Rand returns. If you want to generate Rand returns and you're South African, you have this unique opportunity. If you're not South African, or if you don't hold Rands, you don't have the same opportunity, which is why, again, why it hasn't been squashed, is because it's so segmented to a very small portion of the market. And that's why people in that portion of the market, in my view, really should be doing this.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess then in terms of your real only growth opportunity in terms of getting more customers within crypto arbitrage is to literally just try and get every single human being in South Africa with a tax number as a customer. And I think that would be strategically fascinating, because obviously there's plays through financial advisors, institutions, individuals, but you kind of get to a certain point of economic power when you need to start going for like group-based strategies, whether it's stock files, for example. I think anyway, before we ideate, but I think there's huge opportunity and but also interestingly such a ceiling. So I guess that does just reinforces the points around needing a different product, because this is it's got a threat to its lifespan in terms of if this margin disappears, and the other side of it is that even if it doesn't, we've got a ceiling, like a very, very real ceiling. So talk to me about the other products, and that's the reason why it was started for the business. But why that product?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, the first thing, I'll just sort of summarize what you've said, and I think you've put it perfectly. The crypto arbitrage is a cash cow for individuals. Individuals can utilize this. They can make fantastic returns while it exists. But from a business point of view, the longevity or the risk of no longevity is high. There's a risk that this thing doesn't exist. And so from a sustainable point of view, it's quite hard growing a business around a product that you don't know its lifespan. And so that's always been a bit of a concern for us. Do we hire? Do we not? Particularly in the early days. Like, what if this thing goes away in a month, in 2 months? Luckily, we understand the regulations a bit better and can sort of ascertain that it's not going away anytime soon. But at some point it will. And so we had to pivot and we had to go to something else. And we actually looked long and hard at what are our assets right now. In fact, I had a call with a friend of mine who was the top of actuarial science at UCT. He was also the top student in school, like one of these real super geniuses. His name's Ashraf. And Ashraf and I had a call because he is now head of pivoting at Boston Consulting Group. So he goes and talks to people about, if you're wanting to pivot, where do you pivot to? He comes in, he talks about the implementation of a pivot and what you should pivot to. And we had a nice
Sounds like a guy I'd love to meet, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to introduce you. He's someone that we chatted to for an hour when we already had our view of what we thought we'd pivot to. And he sort of was taking down notes ferociously while we were talking. And we all came to the same conclusion that even though there were options to go deeper into the crypto space, for example, or there was an option to start a hedge fund, given that we were investment related, what we realized is that our biggest asset of all our assets was not actually our client base, although that is a big asset, one we'd like to sort of maintain should the arbitrage fall away. The bigger asset was our relationship with the banks, our understanding of sending money abroad, because that's one of the processes, that's one of the steps of the arbitrage process. You send money abroad and then you bring it back as crypto. So it's just that first leg. And so we kind of all agreed that if we looked at our business as a whole, the biggest asset was the pricing we got from the bank, the service we got from the bank, the relationship we had with them, and our understanding and expertise around the space. Not to mention that we looked at the competitive environment and said, sure, this is done really poorly by banks directly. We can improve on this. And so it kind of took a lot of brainstorming and thinking, because it was a massive decision. Which way are we going to pivot to? Which way are we going to expand our business? But it became pretty evident to us that the foreign exchange model for individuals and for SMEs was the place that there's a gap in South Africa, the place we could add the most value to South Africans, and the place we have the most expertise and have the most authority to improve the world in South Africa. I mean, the finance world in South Africa. Not to mention that if we look at other players in the space, you typically find guys that are 30 years older than me, 30 plus years older than me. And so it was quite interesting to be the new kids on the block doing things differently, because there aren't many people doing things differently. So we realized if we can embrace tech the way the major banks haven't, we're going to win the market just due to a new age thinking, new way of going about things and really putting clients first. And that's what we've really done on that side.
Yeah, so even on that note, I was having dinner with my business partner Brett and a client of ours last night, and we're actually just talking about how in the States and South Africa, there's one similarity in the fact that a lot of our infrastructure was built in the 70s and 80s, which means like that's both on actual bricks and mortar infrastructure, but also a lot of technological infrastructure. What's happening and we compared it to Nairobi, for example, and how they are starting to go leaps and bounds ahead in the technology landscape and the renewable landscape, just because their shift in infrastructure has been a lot more recent, meaning that there's a lot of legacy infrastructure there. Now, I obviously compare that to exactly what you're saying now from banks, right? And all of these massive banks in this oligopoly, they've got infrastructure that's been built 50 years ago. So it makes sense to me, at a high level, why that would allow you to really disrupt that space. Practically, what does that look like? When you talk about the technology, what are you actually doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So back to the fact that we won the top technology award at BCX. The reason we won that award for 2024 is because we have a online dashboard on our arbitrage side. We have something whereby people can transparently track their returns, track their what money's in their account, etc., and look at spreads, look at everything. And we took that approach and said, right, this dashboard has done so well and it's so well viewed, we have to have the same thing on the Forex side. And so what we've got is an online Forex platform where you can manage your payments, you can manage your beneficiaries, you can book trades, you can do everything from your mobile app or from your web app if you want to do it on a computer. But you have a person alongside that who can assist you with everything. And I think where we've utilized technology is not only in allowing people to do their own transactions, etc., but it actually has been used to help internal staff. So, for example, I mean, little things like automated emails and similar things like that just streamline service so heavily that as soon as something's done, the client will receive the correct email or what needs to be done or why, or an internal staff member will say, please call Cameron from the founder files who needs to do XYZ, and they'll know to call you at that point. It's basically enhancing the performance of our internal staff through technology. So I believe technology is there to help people, not to replace them. And that's kind of how we've grown this and how we do things differently to a bank that you might wait a week for something you queried and it was an urgent thing. So it's just about streamlined information, streamlined onboarding, streamlined processes. Once we have one piece of information, we'll never ask for it again. It's little things like this that will, in theory, delight clients relative to what they're used to.
Yeah, and for me, that's always the simplest question to ask yourself if you want to really improve your stickiness, improve your competitive advantage, or just simply add more value, right? And give a great customer experience, is thinking about how can I just make this more convenient for the customer, right? How can I just make their life easier? How can I make this faster? And obviously, with the technological landscape that we live in now, it's going to be through tech. But I also just love the simplicity of that, is because it's not you're not looking at through the lens of technology and looking, how can we build this thing that's awesome and sophisticated? It's like the best technology goes about how do we solve the best problems and help human beings. And so being grounded back in the fact that there's all these issues within this banking infrastructure that just provides a really shit customer experience at the end of the day. Meaning now is that we can really just build some tech to do this a lot faster, and then we immediately win the market because that's the only other thing that they have a comparison to.
Yeah, Cam, it's really interesting. My business partner and CTO, you basically took a replica of what he always tells me. He says, we don't build, I'll use the word since you did, we don't build shit that's cool. We build shit that people want. And I think that mindset is huge. The difference between sort of building cool stuff and going, oh, look how cool this is, but actually clients don't want that, versus saying, what do clients need? What will make clients' lives easier? It might not be the most glamorous thing. It will make like one small change outside, but it might make a hell of a lot of difference to the client. And so we build in a client-centric manner. We basically iterate on, what are you looking for? Okay. And sometimes we think ourselves, what might a client want? Okay, let's try it and see if clients respond well to it. And so it's really built based on empathy, on empathizing what clients want, what they would want, what they would not be too keen on, and prioritizing in that regard.
So, Harry, where we're at now in the story is I'm probably in the exact same position that your customers have been. I say that like I'm not becoming one of your customers at the moment. Literally, this is also me happened offline. I found out about Future Forex. I go to my financial advisor. I was like, should we just do this? This makes more sense. And it's a guy that I've now met. So it makes it a lot easier to do business. But like your customers, this all sounds a bit too good to be true, right? We've spoken half an hour and everything you've said about this business is absolutely amazing and fantastic. And like genuinely, I'm so happy for you. But like,
thanks, man.
You know, we also know life and business. It's not all as amazing sunshine and roses. Talk to me about what's been hard. Talk to me about the hard times. What are things? What's gone wrong? You know, you've showed me how amazing this is. Kind of humanize yourself and your business for a moment to make us all feel better about ourselves now.
No, it's not been an easy journey. I'll start with that, and I'll give you the hardest time of my business journey was March 2023. It was our COO's birthday, the 8th of March, and the offshore exchange stopped accepting funds from South Africa because of grey listing in South Africa, and because they didn't want third-party payments. So we were a company transferring on behalf of Cameron, for example, and they didn't like that. They said, if you want to transfer from the company. But obviously, because we're utilizing people's allowances, we couldn't do that. So our legs were wiped from under us, and we're sitting with, at the time, I believe it was 40, 50 people. You're paying salaries. We didn't have the Forex product yet, and we're making zero income. And we were paying not insignificant amounts each month, as you can imagine, out of my and my business partner's pocket. No funding, no runway from other people. It was our profits going back into our staff. We were having conversations about, do we retrench? Do we wait for this thing to come right? Do we find other providers and then decide? Huge amounts of horrible conversations. And what I found personally, if you want me to humanize this to Harry, I found that my decision-making reduced significantly. In fact, it was one of my feedback points that was given retrospectively, is they noticed that my decisiveness, my ability to make strong decisions, reduced when things were going badly. And the reason for that is I'm too tied. My emotions are too tied to the business. Because you have this business that you treat as your baby, and I would consider it my baby, I get more offended if someone says something unkind about Future Forex than if someone says something unkind about me. I mean, that's the level of attachment I have to this baby. And so when that happens, you naturally, it becomes part of your life. And so when things don't go as well as possible, you become a less good version of yourself. And that happened to me with certainty. And I had to sort of realize after that, luckily, just to spoiler alert, luckily everything came right. We actually got a better process going as a result of that, and we didn't retrench anyone. We stuck to our guns again. Luckily, we were bootstrapped, because if we were funded, I guarantee you the people funding us would have said, right, get rid of staff and get them back if necessary. We said, it's just not good for culture. We don't want that. We want to work our way through this. And I think we've been, our staff have really appreciated that, since all the people that are still with us kind of understand that our hands were tied, but we went for a very generous solution. But retrospectively, my senior members of my staff basically said my decisiveness wasn't as strong. I was asking more about, what should we do here? What should we do there? Whereas typically they look to me as the person who knows what to do. I didn't know what to do. And I've kind of realized that that's something I needed to work on, and have since. I've kind of tried to remove my emotions a little bit, although the business still is a huge part of my life. I make sure that I personally am I'm not too tied to it. So if things are going badly, it's just business. It's not my life. It's less than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I often joke about my full name being Cameron. Easier said than done, Coots. So I think you should take on that that additional name for you now, because I mean, look, every
100%.
single entrepreneur is going to resonate deeply with what you've said. But it's such a critical point. I mean, there's also been so much research done around the quality of decision making when you are in an emotional state of fear versus being one when you're in a relatively neutral or calm emotional state, and how radically different that is. One thing I've experimented with that I found quite useful is I ask myself the question, if I knew everything was going to be okay, what would I choose to do right now? Or if I had no fear, what would I choose to do right now? So it's kind of like regardless of the state that I'm in, these questions I ask myself to put myself into the state. Like, if I was actually in this state, what would I do then? And it's funny how because your brain, when you ask your brain a question, it like now has to answer it. It can't not. So as long as you find the right question to ask yourself, you can pull yourself into that state to pull yourself out of it. So that's a tactic that I use quite frequently, and I've had to when there's been some dark moments in the business, like in every moment, because I get extremely reactive and very impulsive. And what should we do about this? It's like, oh, should we actually, like, I'm worried about that client not saying yes. Should we give them a 30% discount and then add on a whole bunch of extra services for free? And then what ends up happening is, like, I get spoken off the cliff by Brett to not do that. And then we get the deal anyway. And I'm like, I'm so happy I didn't do that. So it's been those situations. Operating from a place of fear is really not good for decision making. So yeah, talk to me about what you've learned. You said you've worked on this a lot in the year, but I think before getting into the answer of what you've learned, can you give me some examples of, what are these where you like look back and it was like, that was actually objectively not a good decision, but it came from the state that I was in. So can you give me some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start off by saying I'm definitely going to use that strategy. I think it's very clever to force your brain to answer the question of, if everything were to be okay, what would I do now? I think that's a very clever way of tricking your brain into getting the correct answer, whereas otherwise it doesn't. And yeah, in terms of what have I learned and where have I gone wrong, I mean, let's look back at this example because it was the most challenging time for the company. And I remember we were looking at using service providers who we hadn't done a full due diligence on. And like you got talked off the cliff, I also got talked off the cliff by Josh, who's far more skeptical than me. He's my co-founder, whereby I wanted to use service providers that I hadn't done a full test and a full due diligence on because we needed to make revenue again. We needed to get back. We were losing money every day. And there were guys saying, we can do this for you. And we did a semi due diligence, but we hadn't completed it. And I was like, can we not just open this to some clients? Can we not just get this going in the meantime? Like, let's go, let's get some money back. Terrible decision making. Obviously not. Obviously, you have to fully test anything you do. Luckily, we didn't do that because, as I said, I'm very thankful to have Josh, who I'm the growth guy. I'm the let's get it done yesterday. He's the let's wait till next year guy. And between the two of us, we come to a happy compromise. Exactly. And what ended up happening is he said, I'm not comfortable with using them. I think we need to do more due diligence. So I'm going to sort of, or he didn't even veto it. He said, don't you think X, Y, Z? And it was like that voice of reason that I needed, which I usually have internally, but because things were going badly, I lost it. I lost the voice of reason temporarily. And I needed him to be my voice of reason. We didn't use them. We waited a bit longer, got the correct solution, which had a huge amount of due diligence applied. For what it's worth, that other company that we were going to use did end up being sufficient and safe. So even if we had used them, we would have been okay. And our competitors did for interest's sake. Some of our competitors did, but we didn't because we'll never do anything without being certain that we have the lowest level of risk doing it. And I lost that inside myself. So I think going forward, what have I learned? Well, in similar situations, I try put on the rational hat. I didn't have the strategy you've just told me to ask myself, what would I do if everything was going to be okay, which I think would have got me there a lot easier. But I kind of forced myself in future situations to think of this as a business person, not as an emotional person, not as someone who is tied to this. And if this does badly, people will think badly of Harry. It's more around what is the correct business decision academically as a business owner, and having that intention to actually think about it academically has helped me, which is similar to what you said, but not as strong. I think your way of doing it is actually even stronger.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear it. Where I actually got that from is I did a 7-month self-love course. So like out of all the things to do, that's where I got that wisdom from. And the reason for that is as someone who's grounded my career as being a healthcare practitioner, I'm registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. People in these professions have a tendency to prioritize the needs of others above their own. So like it's the actual core question was, if I loved myself, what would I choose to do right now? And what I've found for me is like, that's something that I struggle to really resonate with because especially when I'm in productive mode, it's not necessarily about like love and acceptance and feeling good. It's more just it's more based on fear and action and decision making. So I've reformatted that question into something that works for me in a business realm. I'm glad it resonates with you as well.
Yeah, it completely resonates. I mean, I can completely empathize. With I think we were talking about it offline, but just to bring it online because I think it's a really important point. Both of us as entrepreneurs, we care more about sort of achievement and what's next than we do about waking up and smelling the roses and saying, "Wow, what we've done is amazing." And so I think it's very linked to this concept of being unable to love yourself because there's so much more to do, and you rather, how close am I to this goal? Why have we not hit that goal? Okay, when are we going to hit this? And being intentional about taking a step back and saying, hold on a second, what you've done is great. Like let's take a second to actually enjoy that, and then we can move on to what goals are next. And again, that's something that I think from my psychology sessions I've learned actively to do that because my natural way of being doesn't do that. My natural way of being does not give any credit to well done on doing X. It just goes, what's next?
Yeah, and I totally resonate with that. And yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I guess I'll go one level deeper now on this. The reason why I also love that question of if I knew everything was going to be okay, what would I choose to do right now? It also allows me to tap into more self-loving decisions because like I'll be sitting there on a day, have a phone call or trying to be like basically I haven't taken a break for like 3 hours or 4 hours. And it's this moments where like I know I got to be working. I've got so much on my plate. I'm gonna have to either catch up this evening or this weekend. And to ask myself that question of if I knew everything that was going to be okay, what would I choose to do right now? I'd sometimes take a step back and be like, immediately I'm going to go take a break. I'm going to sit down, and it's very different. The way I take that break is very different to me saying I should take a break right now because my productivity is worsening because I have been staring at a screen for 3 hours. Because then what happens is I just go outside and I still don't switch off. Versus now it's like everything's gonna be fine. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna be in a different state to do so. And often it's gotten me into situations where I've looked at what I've been doing and I was like, I don't actually need to be doing this in the first place at all. Right. So and I'll scrap certain decisions. It's been really powerful for me, both on the macro and on the micro.
Yeah, absolutely. I think breaks are really healthy. They underratedly healthy. I mean, as an example, I haven't taken much leave this year, and again, I can sense my enthusiasm as an excitement over the year has naturally deteriorated slightly, and with that comes bad decision making, bad ability to sell, and when I say sell, I don't mean sell to clients. I mean sell internally, sell what we're doing, sell how exciting what we're doing is. And so, yeah, I've kind of decided I don't know what I'm doing with the time, but I am taking the 9th of December until the new year off. I am. It's a certainty so that I can ensure that 2025 can get off the ground with a bang. And it's not about sort of, I need leave, I should take it. It's about this is better for the business. It is better for the business if I take time off. And I think people sometimes are harsh on themselves, like, oh, I'm taking too much leave this year. I took too much leave at this moment. The business needs leave, and I push that through to our employees as well. I say I'm not impressed if you don't take any leave. That doesn't impress me. It impresses me more if you take leave when you need it, so the quality of work is always strong. Leave is important. Leave is needed. And I think this is where America goes a bit wrong.
Yeah,
their leave policies are it's crazy. It's crazy. How can you be expected to work at the top of your ability with so few days leave? So yeah, I think leave is really important, and I rate it very, very highly if taken correctly.
Yeah, so on that exact note, I mean, this is why our mission is to ensure that as many entrepreneurs as possible can take a holiday where they actually switch off and refresh while their business keeps growing. And it's not just around like December, is like being able to do that throughout the year. And the short answer to how we do that is the same reason as why taking a rest isn't the antidote to burnout for an entrepreneur. It's very important to down-regulate your nervous system, which is going to be crucial for managing burnout. But the point is that doesn't quieten your mind, and you don't switch off. when you've clarified your strategy to the point where you've got so much clarity and confidence about where you're headed, what you're doing, the decisions that you're making, and you know that your team around you shares that as well, that's when you can give yourself the permission to properly switch off. And that's just practically why we are the antidote to the founder's trap, but also an antidote to entrepreneurial burnout and stress. And the funny thing is, it's not therapy, it's strategy. Maybe a bit of business therapy thrown in there, but that's why we exist. That's on the one side. And then on the other side around leave, this is also where we kind of walk the talk in a sense, where we've got a mandatory policy that every quarter in MedEvolve, you have to take a 4-day long weekend, right? That's baked in. And we've got unlimited leave policy. You're an adult. You can, as long as your work's getting done, take as much leave as you want. The only thing we have to do administratively is measure it so that you're actually taking enough legally mandated leave. Or if you don't, then actually I'm not going to pay you out. I'm going to make you take a break more proactively. But that's just because it reminds me of a very simple phrase that I really liked, is stress plus rest equals growth, right? And stress is very normal in life. It's something that we can't necessarily get away from. Stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Strain is a bad thing. But the problem with stress without rest is when you start taking strain, and that's when you burn out. And rest, it needs to happen both physically and mentally. Mic drop.
Yeah, I think Cam, I completely back what you're saying, and I just want to talk about the unlimited leave policy you guys have got. I was really stoked to hear that you say that you then check that people are taking the right amount of leave, and you don't say we're going to pay you out. You say take more leave, please. That's not enough leave. Like, please take more, because I find that a lot of these corporates, the ones that went for the unlimited leave policy, almost used it as a way to guilt people into taking leave, because it's unlimited leave, take as much as you want. But then every time you take, you feel a little bit guilty that you're like taking this unallotted amount. And so it needs to be managed correctly. It needs to be managed in a way that we will make sure that you take enough leave. You're an adult, get your work done. But on top of that, we will make sure that you actually do take leave, because otherwise people end up taking less leave than they would if they actually had leave, because they feel bad when doing so. I know I'm included in this as I guess a competitive achiever is my Enneagram type. I'm not going to be the guy that takes more leave than anyone else. I'm going to be the guy that takes the least leave. And then unlimited leave actually,
or you can flip the script on that, and you make sure that you're number one. It's like, I take the most leave. Look, I'm going to get the award for most amount of leave here.
Yeah, and still getting my shit done. Exactly. Yeah. But I think that's the one thing I've always had an issue with unlimited leave, is that if it isn't monitored correctly, as you guys do, it can be bad for employees. And that's why we do actually have a leave policy, but we also ensure people take the leave, and we also don't pay people out for excess leave. We rather say take a longer break. You're not taking enough leave. It's healthy to take leave. It will increase your performance.
Cool, Harry. So, right, that we've gotten into quite a lot now. Thank you for opening up, being a bit vulnerable. I love the fact that we also got a little bit personal there as well, and shared some philosophy of what it means to be a little bit healthy. I guess there's a lot more that I really want to talk about in terms of being a leader and leadership. So you've spoken about how the state that you're in, the mood, affects your decisions and how you're operating in the business. Talk to me about, what else has been really tough and tricky for you in growing this business. As a leader, as a person.
Yeah, I am not good at difficult conversations. And there was a interesting stat that it said there's a disproportionate amount of psychopaths that are CEOs, and I can completely understand why. It's because a CEO's job revolves around good conversations and bad conversations, and if you can remove emotion from bad conversations and look at it purely from a business point of view, it makes your job a hell of a lot easier. I'm not good at that. My emotions flare up massively.
I was wondering where you're going with that, bringing up the psychopath points, and I was like, is this going to be your public admittance to psychopathy?
Yeah, no, I sometimes it would be much easier. Sometimes I wish I could just turn off emotions, but I don't have that ability. And so what happens is I have sleepless nights before a big talk. After sleepless nights, I'm not good at getting prepped for the meeting because I'm concerned about it, particularly when something's not working and you're needing to let someone go. That's very difficult for me, very, very difficult. And what I'm able to do is put on sort of business mode Harry in the call and sort of explain the rationale, try not to be emotional in the call, while of course empathizing and realizing how tough this conversation must be for them as well. But internally it's eating me up. Those conversations are the worst part of my job. I said the best part of my job is growing people. So naturally, the worst part of my job is when things aren't working out with someone, you can't find a way out of that. And so that's something I'm not particularly good at. And what I've tried to do is I lean on my team members to help me with that. Number one, you got to realize you're not going to be great at everything, and when you're not good at something, there are going to be other people that are better than you. But number two is that I'm able to sort of realize that what's good for the business helps the majority of people rather than what helps one person. And I think it was a guy who's been on your show before, Jonathan Berkowitz, who said to me, he said, easy conversations, hard life, hard conversations, easy life. And I always think of that. It's the idea that if you don't have that conversation, you're just going to have that conversation in smaller doses over and over again, and you're going to have a less happy life. Whereas if you let it out once and have that difficult conversation, this isn't just in business, this is in anything, in a relationship, a friendship, whatever it is. If there's something that's bothering you, if you don't mention it, it's going to bother you a whole of a lot more than if you mention it in one go and kind of say, this is my issue, this is how it can be solved in my view, what do you think? So I've basically taken that line of thinking and thought to myself, this is the right decision for the business. This is the right thing to do. This is going to help everyone else in the business, going to help us do better and therefore make everyone else happy. And if you look at total happiness, total utility, you're going to increase it by making this difficult decision. And that's the way I kind of trick my brain into being okay with what I'm doing, even though I'm really not.
Yeah, so shout out to Jono for that pearler of wisdom. I love it, and I've heard something very similar that's really resonated with me. If you cannot accept short-term discomfort, you're accepting long-term dysfunction. And in other words, is that's your trade-off. You're either going to take short-term discomfort and conflicts, or you're going to get long-term dysfunction in the relationship. And that applies both on a one-to-one relationship with your partner, or within your business and within your team. And that's also why at MedEvolve, one of our core values is candor. So not only just being honest and transparent and direct. Ooh, that's a good segue into another topic that you want to talk about. But it's also making sure that you are having the hard conversations early. So one thing that stood out to me from what you said that I'm quite curious about is, obviously I agree, you can't be good at everything. You got to have your strengths and whatnot. But there's one way that we can cut this cake that makes it look like you palming off the hard stuff to your team. Right, it's where you as the leader, it's like okay, well, I'll let someone else be the bad cop. I'll just do the fun stuff. How do you navigate that? Because that is a real consequence of you not having this conversation when someone's like, no, I want to have this chat with you, and it's like, sorry, I'm not good at this. Go chat to my CEO. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, Cam. So maybe I need to clarify there, because I don't do that, and I would never do that. It's actually the opposite. I am involved in every conversation around sort of senior people where it's a difficult conversation. And I even jump in for more junior staff when the line manager is unable to. When I resort to when I refer to my team, it's to do with strategy. How do I go about this? How do I put this in a way that they'd understand? It's more to sort of leverage them because they're good at making it sound a certain way, which keeps the peace between people. That's where I think they're better than me. But in terms of walking the walk, I will always walk the walk. I'll be the one to have the call. It's very important to me because of exactly what you said. I don't want to be perceived, or more than that, I don't want to be the person that says, oh, this is tough, you do it. This is easy, I enjoy this, I'll do it. It's not the way I act. It's not the way that I think of functional business connect. And it's not the way to gain respect from your team. If you want to be a leader, you got to lead from the front.
Oh, it's just if you want to be a person with good character at the end of the day. And so for the record, like I knew that was the answer, but I just wanted to go into that and make sure that we'll just see how you navigate leaning on your team in moments of hard conversations. I guess the thing that I love about human beings, we're extremely complex. We're actually not very complicated, because this exact same situation will happen here, is the fact that it's like if you're having difficulties with a friend or with your significant other, what often happens is you'll go and phone your family or phone your friends in terms of like, I need to have this chat, or even when this is why we're also in therapy. It's like I know I need to have this conversation, but I don't know how to go about doing this. And it's like, then you word out what you're going to say, and they're like, don't say it like that. That's not going to end well. Right. Exactly. Same thing happens in business, because we're human beings with emotions and feelings, right? And so whenever people say that a business is not a place for emotions, they are actually, I think, extremely lacking in self-awareness. Anyway, that's a rabbit hole. I think to put it back, what are the kind of tactics and strategies have you developed to navigate having hard conversations? Because I think, as you say, it's not something that you're good at. I've found that there's very few people that are good at it. I'm curious to meet someone where this is a natural talent, but it is in leadership a very necessary skill to develop. So how have you gone about developing that skill? How are you developing that skill? And what do you do to kind of prepare and weather these difficult conversations?
Yeah. So what I've learned from people around me is that the best way to tackle these is to make it sort of two-pronged. So the first prong is, here's the things that we think you've done well. So always sort of starting with, you have done this well, you have done that well, you have done the other well, and here are the reasons that it's not working. And often the way of doing that has to be around sort of giving them responsibility, but also saying some of it is sort of unlucky. Like, let's say someone's struggling with their team and they're the manager. Maybe instead of saying, you're a terrible manager, you don't know how to keep people happy, you
That's
say
going to
to
go down
them,
brilliantly.
exactly, going to go down great. You instead say something along the lines of, this doesn't seem to be a fit. The people that you're managing don't resonate with the management style. So it's less about, you're so bad, you did this wrong, and more about, it didn't work in the situation. And that's something that I guess I've learned from my team, is the way to navigate it in such a way that you don't put the blame solely on the person, you put the blame on the situation. And something that I'm not good at, quite frankly, and I'd love advice if you've got any on how to improve it, is how to ensure that you don't have sleepless nights around this stuff, because that I still do. That's something I haven't resolved, and I've just kind of dealt with it. Said, right, sometimes things are bad in business. Sometimes you got to have not the greatest sleep and and you're thinking about it nonstop, but this too shall pass. I don't know if you have any advice on kind of trying to remove yourself.
Yeah, immediately on the off the cuff one, I'll get to that in a second. But just to because I like to think in principles, and like kind of universal truths. The one I really liked about when delivering difficult feedback, having hard conversations with people, is kick the ball, not the player, right? And so don't make it about the person, make it about the behavior, the situation, the object, because that way, how do I orientate myself to the fact that we are on the same side of the table instead of on opposite sides of the table, and the fact that we're talking about the issue and we're going to work together to figure this out, instead of me telling you how to kick the ball. It's more about the fact that it's like, we've got an issue with how that ball is being kicked. You just happen to be the one that was in that position at the time. How are we going to work out how we're going to navigate that later? It's I still haven't figured out a way to get people not in a state of defensiveness when that happens, unless they're people that are you get people on a spectrum of like super open to feedback and wanting to learn, and people that are very sensitive but listening to feedback. That's kind of just the reality of humans, but I found that to be very effective. My off-the-cuff one, this is as Cameron, not psychologist or strategy coach, to your answer around sleepless nights, is just self-forgiveness, man. I think this is the part of business and life and dealing with human beings that we give it our best shot. We'll sit there and we'll ruminate and we'll think about what we could have said differently and could have done differently. I think it's giving ourselves permission to exist and giving ourselves permission to just be flawed and imperfect and learning from that. And then also doubling down on that is, it's also not a big problem that we have in our more individualistic westernized society is viewing negative emotions as bad, rather than as signals. Like the conscious lived experience of an emotion like shame or embarrassment or guilt obviously doesn't feel good, but the whole purpose and reason why that emotion and feeling exists in the first place is in order to teach you to shift your own behavior moving forward. So if we're able to remove ourselves from that situation, look at the emotion as something that's teaching me, that, like, the same metaphor I can give to being in an ice bath is like, I know I'm choosing the discomfort and I'm having this discomfort anyway, but what is this discomfort allowing me to be? And yeah, looking for the lesson in the feeling, capturing the lesson, and then allowing yourself to just feel the feeling and letting it dissipate. I hope that makes sense. I'm yet to find a way to explain that in a way that doesn't sound extremely intangible and abstract. But that's my first thought.
No, thanks. It is helpful, and I think going back to what you said initially around self-forgiveness. I mean, it's interesting because you haven't necessarily done much wrong apart from putting the wrong person in the wrong place, which you couldn't have known at the time. But it still would help to sort of give yourself self-forgiveness and say you have to have this conversation. It won't be fun. It won't be nice for them, but like you got to forgive yourself for that. Because I've never actually looked at it like that. Because I've always been like, I'm not doing anything wrong here. This just sucks. But it still does help, even if you're not doing anything wrong, to like forgive yourself for making someone else feel suboptimal.
Well, on that, there's like the definition of forgiveness that I really like is I let go of my permission to punish you. I let go of my right to punish you. And so for me, self-forgiveness is simply that, is like for whether it's a mistake or not, and it's about the fact that especially people that can be achievement orientated like you and I, often how we motivate ourselves towards achievement is the chastising and self-critique in order to improve. And I think in order to remove that and being highly critical is removing the right, like forgiveness is removing the right to punish myself. And then it's like, okay, well, if I'm doing that, but I still want to learn, what do I have left? And it's kind of like, well, maybe just some kindness and acknowledging what it is the actual lesson is. It's like, do you know what that feels like? And even saying that out loud, it's like, that would be a lot nicer.
Yeah, 100%. No, completely agree and completely resonate with what you're saying there.
Cool. I guess I think that now we're really now we're deep and vulnerable in the feelings of human nature and leadership. The topic you brought up earlier on not good at being grateful. It's also something that I resonate with, and it's something that I look at with it's you got to celebrate the wins, celebrate the successes. I've got some opinions and thoughts about that. Talk to me about your experience of not good at being grateful, but why is it an important topic to you? Why do you think it's relevant to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. So what it comes down to is without being grateful, you reduce your happiness, and you only get one life. And even if you can look back and say, shit, what we did in the last 5 years has been remarkable, if you're not enjoying every moment of that, you're wasting your time. You got to enjoy the journey, not just the destination. And I find myself being very, very guilty of not enjoying the journey at times, particularly when things aren't going as smoothly as they should be, and just looking forward to that destination. And when it comes, there's a new destination. You don't sort of have a party because you hit the destination. You look at the further destination, and it's almost chasing a rainbow. You're never going to hit the destination where you go, fantastic, I'm there, we've done it. There's always going to be something new. And while it's fantastic for achievement, I think it's offsetting things. There's achievement and there's happiness. And I think while it's very good for achievement, not being grateful, it's not good for happiness. And what you got to try and find is a situation where you're more grateful to yourself, so you increase your happiness, but it doesn't remove from your achievement, willingness for achievement, if that makes sense. And I remember or rather a quote that I really, really like is Naval Ravikant. He's a you're nodding, so you know who he is, but just for everyone else,
he's a business philosopher. He's a self-proclaimed business philosopher. It was economist. It was a venture capitalist as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
And just a super wise person.
Yeah, I listened to his almanac, which is like all his thoughts, his tweets, etc. I listened to the audio version on YouTube. It's a guide to wealth and happiness. And what's really interesting is he spoke about wealth and how to become wealthy and how to leverage your time, etc., and everything business related. And I completely resonated, and it was like easy for me. I was like, this all makes perfect sense. I'm doing all of this. This isn't a problem. He basically in the middle says, and then I realized that being wealthy doesn't actually make you happy. And then he talks about how he went on to basically work on his happiness, and that was largely foreign to me. I was like, geez, I don't know any of this stuff. Like he spoke about meditation and gratefulness, etc. I was like, I don't do any of this. The first part completely resonated with me, the second part not at all. And it's quite interesting. His definition of happiness, which I really like, he says it's impossible to define happiness, but he feels the closest definition is the absence of desire, which I really like. All happiness is the absence of desire. It's just that you don't require anything more. You're now content with what you've got. It's contentment. And at present, I don't show any contentment, quite frankly. I always want more. I always want the next thing. And while I don't think, while I think drive and ambition is very important and you have to have it and you have to have that desire for something, you've got to balance that with contentment with what you've got and with gratefulness for what you've got and with happiness in your existing life. And that's what I'm working on currently. I think from the wealth point of view, I get it. I get all the logic. I've naturally been able to run a business and grow a business using those fundamentally without actually learning them. It just came naturally to me. On the happiness side, I'm a novice. I've got to learn how to be grateful, how to take a step back, how to be content, and balance that with continuing to want to sort of generate wealth for my company, generate wealth for the people that work within the company, and get their happiness up at the same time. And that combination is what I'm really trying to work on.
Yeah, I just love this as a topic because I can see the paradox between ambition and or striving, as my therapist likes to call it, and that's different to ambition. But that and contentment. But because I'm such a radical believer in win-win. I'm gonna, or maybe I'm fooling myself according to Naval Ravikant, but I can still see room for both. And I think that you can still have a space where, like, as my grandfather said, is gratitude isn't simply just being thankful for things; it's a mindset towards life, and I find that to be incredibly true and very wise. Also, again, something that's easier said than done, but for me, you can still be grateful with what you have and what you've achieved and where you're at right now, and experience gratitude for what's around you, but still have a desire for more. I think for where it can potentially be paradoxical is in that definition that I like with Naval in talking about desire, because now it's talking about, well, where is your motivation coming from, and is it achievement and ambition oriented, and is about the fact that am I going towards a goal, because that's the slippery slope of once I get there, then I'll be happy, which in that definition is kind of the antithesis to happiness and contentment. Versus now the shifting in terms of like, okay, well, I'm still gonna have this ambition anyway, but how can I do this from a place of purpose? How can I do this from a place of intrinsic motivation? How can I do this from a place of fulfillment? And that for me is one of the things that I really aspire to, and something that I deeply value is fulfillment. It's a huge reason why we do what we do, and why I'm still obviously ambitious in what I'm trying to achieve materially, in a material realm of success with my business. But for me, that is never going to trump fulfillment. And so I'm still also trying to figure out this gratitude path. But for me, using fulfillment as the aim, I think, I'm still figuring this out, but I think for me is the answer towards how is it that we can have both gratitude and contentment, happiness and ambition and desire all at the same time. Because fulfillment is something that's quite continuous. It can just keep going.
Yeah, I completely back that. And I wouldn't want a life where I have the absence of desire, despite that being the definition in Naval's words of happiness. I don't want that life. I don't want a life where I'm not pushing for something new, because that's what gives me happiness in my view. So you're right. Fulfillment is that in between, but it doesn't mean that what Naval said is complete nonsense. It isn't. It has a lot of value in its own right. And so I'm just trying to balance that. I'm trying to balance his view of happiness being the absence of desire with my requirements for more things. And right now I'm far more on this side of the rope than that side, and I'm trying to get somewhere in the middle where I can be more content with what I've got, more grateful with what I've got, but still be fulfilled by doing more. And that's basically the winning formula, if I can get it right.
Well, I guess on the topic of taking stock, being grateful for where you're at, I mean, looking where we're at now, you're going to be taking this month-long holiday pretty soon, but still having this ambition for what you want to achieve. I guess talk to me about the next 6 to 12 months, Harry. What does the future look like for you in Future Forex?
Yeah, so on the arbitrage side, the crypto arbitrage side, we've been doing fantastically well. If we can just keep growing the way we have been, that's amazing. And to be honest, as a result, apart from sort of large regulatory changes or changes in market conditions or anything like that, I largely have my hands clear of that side of the business. It's working like a well-oiled machine. We have fantastic people in charge of the right places to make sure that this thing is going to function as optimally as possible. So really, really happy on that side of the business. The side that I'm focusing largely on is the Forex side of the business. We believe that we have so much value to add to individuals, to SMEs, and we're amazed that 95% of the market still use banks directly to send money abroad. They don't use intermediaries like Future Forex, who are quite frankly just better in all regards. They completely dominate. A company like ours genuinely does completely dominate using a bank. It's cheaper. It's better service, it's less time, it's someone to hold your hand through everything. And really, it's remarkable to us that only 5% of businesses and individuals have actually cottoned onto this, because the default is, oh, I'm going to use the bank because there's an oligopoly that happens whereby, oh, that's just who you use for Forex, you know? And we're trying to change that narrative, much like we did in the crypto arbitrage space, where we changed the narrative from if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, which I agree with. There are exceptions. There are times where you can utilize something intelligent to do better than the status quo, but with a lower risk. And we did that. We educated people on how that was possible on the investment side. And we're basically using that same educator mentality to do the same on the Forex side.
So my hypothesis on that, unsolicited, is that it's more actually about the switching cost. It's not necessarily about the Forex elements and going there and the fact that I'm going with the bank that's always done it. It's just the fact that I'm kind of already here. So
Absolutely.
for me to switch that on and versus going down this process, even though the onboarding can be this exceptional, it's that shift is like, is it worth it? And I think that's the incentive for switching cost is like what's going to really shift the behavior versus me just sticking to the status quo.
Well, Cam, it links so well to a previous point we mentioned where I said easy conversations, hard life. You said basically instant gratification is not worth longer term benefit. We were talking about this, and it's exactly the same on the Forex side. You've got to sink a tiny bit of time initially into changing, and we've streamlined it to make that cost, that switching cost, as small as possible. To be clear, no money cost here. This is purely a time cost. And we try to make that as small as possible. But you're right. It is non-zero. There's a non-zero time element that goes into switching. But that so quickly gets outweighed by the amount of time you save on doing international payments, not to mention the money you save. I mean, let's leave money out of it, even though it is cheaper. Let's look at the time you save in time of someone doing everything for you, start to finish, having somebody you trust, whereby you need something done, you just say, hey, Future Forex, you guys do this, and we do everything start to finish. It's one of those where you have that hard conversation up front. You basically have that little bit of time sink in setting it up, and you have an easy life as a result, relative to the easy conversation with your major bank. I was going to mention a name, but I'll get sued. So with your major bank, and you end up having a hard life in that when you want to do something, not only are you overcharged, they also say this BOP code is incorrect, and you say, what does that mean? What are you talking about? Or, you know, they say something like, where's your AIT? And you say, what is an AIT? You have a hard life because each time you have to do a little bit of extra stuff rather than being told from the onset, don't worry, we do that as a complimentary service. It's done. You can send your money whenever. So again, one of these, you're 100% right though. The switching cost is the reason that 95% of people use the oligopoly that is the major banks, and only 5% are savvy enough to actually think, right, I've got to change right now. The sooner I change, the more I save in time, not to mention the money I save.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's an idea in there for what's an incentive for them to take action, because it's on that. It's like we can communicate how much time is going to be saved down the line right now, but it's just that initial pain of changing now. What's in it for me in order to do so, and that's that incentive. I use the word deliberately besides value proposition. But yeah, you're not my clients yet, so I'm not going to provide strategic recommendations on how to unlock more clients yet. But Harry, I guess thank you very much for being on the Founder Files. It's been an absolutely amazing conversation. The last question I have for you is, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll start with that. And yeah, just to start off and buy myself a bit of time here, it's been great to be on. So thanks very much for having me. Perhaps a question that could be asked would be, are you happy at the moment? Are you happy? And I think the reason I want to end off on that is that my response is something that actually makes me happy thinking about it, which is that, quite frankly, I've never been more fulfilled. I've never been happier. I've never worked harder, make no mistake. But when I look at my time at EY as an actuary, when I look at my time at a different company as a business development director, when I was working for people where I didn't agree exactly with the way they did things, how they went about things, there was an innate disdain for the way things were done, and I wasn't actually happy. In fact, if I look back at my early career, I'd argue I was relatively depressed without knowing it. I looked up like sort of the symptoms of depression, and I was like, well, that's not far off how I was, even though I was a very happy person externally. Right now, I am so fulfilled that my level of happiness is the highest it's ever been, and I hope I only get happier from here as I sort of work on the idea of gratefulness, of sort of giving myself time back, of not being overly achievement centric. I hope that I can only increase it. But if we look at the chart, I'm the happiest I've been, and that's a really exciting thought.
I'm really happy for you, man. Thank you for sharing your story on the Founder Files. Thank you for getting vulnerable, open, authentic, a bit philosophical with me. I always love these conversations. Happy I get to do that publicly. And yeah, thanks for being you and building a really great business. Can't wait to see how it continues. And I can't wait for you to help me do some great things with my own financial affairs.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. Great to be on.
Besides the amazing philosophical conversations that we had, which I am an absolute sucker for, one thing stood out to me in the conversation is that Harry has a friend who is the head of pivoting at BCG. One, love that as a job title for him. Two, also the access to someone of that kind of caliber is incredible. And I think the reality here is, for most entrepreneurs, we don't have access to people on our networks that are the heads of departments at these management and strategy consulting firms. It's a big reason why MetaVolve exists, is the fact that the people that we think need some kind of counsel or advice or a sounding board around strategy, it's just really not accessible. There isn't anything in there. We don't have the McKinseys, we don't have the BCGs, we don't have the Bains, etc., that can help entrepreneurs building businesses. And that's exactly why MetaVolve exists. So if you want to find a sounding board, someone to bounce your strategic thinking off of, come have a no strings attached conversation with me or my business partner, Brett. That's why we exist. I think Brett would often get frustrated how much I'm willing to give away for free, but genuinely, I'd love to meet you as an audience member. If you want strategic sounding boards to, bounce some thoughts around about your business, and you can't really have access to the head of pivoting at BCG, then reach out to me. Love to have a conversation with you. But that's it for now. Thank you for listening to episode 100 of the Founder Files. It's been great to be here. It's great to have you here. I can't wait for 100 more. Thank you very much. Goodbye.